Good afternoon, or good morning, or good day, depending on what time it is where you are, whether you're watching this live or the replay. Welcome to another installation of Huddle Up with the Fun Coach. I'm Mark Duncan. I am the Fun Coach. It's great to be here. And it is the middle of December, December 15th to be exact. And it is that time of year, regardless of your organization's fiscal year, whether it's July to June or October to September or November to October or January to December, which is the calendar fiscal year. It doesn't matter. This time of year is the time of year that people like to give, and they certainly like to do so before the end of the year. And I want to talk a little bit about this. Obviously, the typical reason people want to give and make sure they get their giving in by the end of the year is most people think it's because of taxes. And while that seems to be the driving factor for why we as nonprofit organizations push for giving at this time of year, I don't necessarily think that's really the big reason why people give. I have a top five. I'm going to walk through my top five. This is not based on any particular data. This is based on my experience in the 24, 25 plus years I've been in fundraising and 35 years in nonprofit work. I've sort of developed a top five list as to why people give. And I'm going to do it in order of from five to one. Okay. So let's start with number five. And I was alluding to this just a moment ago. The number five reason why people give, again, this is my list, is for tax breaks or tax deductions. Now, most nonprofit organizations really drive home this sort of tax deductible gift piece. At the end of the day, it's really not why people give. I mean, it's at the bottom of my list of why people support um, nonprofit organizations, especially when you look at how the tax laws have changed over the last, I guess it's been 4 years now, under these new tax laws. The charitable deduction uh, aspect of the taxes was changed dramatically, such that uh, the expectation is it was going to deter people from giving. And what we've seen is actually an increase year after year, especially these last 2 or 3 years of giving by individuals. We've seen an increase in, especially in the dollar amount. So that expectation really didn't pan out. And it's probably because, like I said, I don't believe that people give because they are interested in getting a tax deduction. Um, but it is also a reason why you should still follow all the rules that you follow, making sure that you provide a thank you letter to all of your donors. If you haven't thanked your donors that have given this year, and I know sometimes with smaller staffs, with lots of things going on, that is one thing that can tend to fall through the cracks. Not a good best practice. I'm not saying that it's okay. You should be aiming to turn around thank you letters, the formal letter, at least within 48 hours of receiving the gift. If you have to go a week, that's fine. But anything longer than that, you'll lose track of it. And then you're going to be in a situation where here you are at the end of the year, or by, I believe it's January 31st, you would have to have those thank you letters out for any gifts that came in 2022. So, but you have to, for those people who will benefit from a tax deduction, uh, getting a letter out to them with all the information on the letter that cites the fact that you're a 501c3, make sure you do that. But we have to one thing we have to recognize, I'm not saying that you know all of these things about your donors, but what the new tax law did is it increased the standard deduction about $12,950 for individual standard deduction, and for a couple, it's $25,900. So if an individual has given more than $12,950, then they're going to itemize their on that those gifts on their taxes. But if their annual giving across the board, no matter what organization, collectively is under that, then it really isn't going to benefit them to itemize because the standard deduction is going to be higher than that. This was the thing that we thought was going to um, deter giving, and it just hasn't. And primarily because I don't believe that the tax deduction is the number one reason why people give to nonprofits. It's not. We have to. I know we tout it. We think that it gets people excited. I see people making sure that on their business cards that it's known that they're 501c3. And quite frankly, again, in my opinion, based on my experience, it is really not the main reason people give. So let's go to number four. Number four, just the basic feeling that it is important to help people. Like that's again been my experience that people want to give because they want to help other people. And so that is something that you need to be mindful of. And yes, you can certainly talk about the tax deduction piece, but don't let that drive your message as it relates to giving. They want to help because you're helping other people. They want to help because of the impact that you're having on the lives of the people that you serve. Number three, they will give to your organization because they trust you, they trust your leadership, they trust that you are actually going to use those dollars as you've described, and they also want you to be transparent about it. So trust and transparency are another reason why people give to nonprofit organizations. Number two, and this is, I think, one of the most important ones, and that is mission alignment or mission affinity. We have seen a major change over the last two generations, maybe three. So I'm going to go back to the silent generation and maybe boomers who were born early in the boomer phase in the mid 40s, maybe early 50s. Back then, when they received all of the requests in the mail, everyone would open up those requests, lay them out, and everybody would get a little bit of something. It was like they were giving to every sharing, spreading the wealth, and giving it to everybody that asked. Now, fast forward, especially with millennials, and I'll include Generation X in there as well. Now we're giving to things that are most important to us. We're giving to things that we're involved in. We're giving to things that benefited us. And so we want to turn around and pay that forward. We're giving to things that are in alignment with who we are as individuals, what's important to us. And we're also giving to things that we know and we know about, organizations that we know about. And so it's really, really key that we understand that, and I often talk about link, interest, and ability. And so the interest piece is what I'm talking about here. They're giving because they're interested in your mission. They're giving because it aligns with who they are, or they have a strong affinity for your organization. And that's really, really important to a lot of folks. And so that is number two. Number one, the number one reason, again, this is my list. The number one reason why I believe people give to support nonprofit organizations is simply because they were asked. Now, we ask in a number of ways. We ask, we just had Giving Tuesday a few weeks ago. And so, or any other giving day that's dedicated. That is a moment when people are giving because they've been asked to support. They're paying attention to your message. Direct mail, email, if you're inviting them to an event, you're asking them to support. And of course, the most effective way to raise dollars is through relationship fundraising, and that's when you're asking someone who has capacity for a specific amount to support your mission. But that's the number one reason why people give. And I believe there is a data point out there, and I cannot quote exactly where this is sourced from, but I do know that when asked, roughly 85% of people said that they give because they were asked. And so, one thing that we cannot do as nonprofit organizations is to sit idly by and wait for people to give and then wonder why they don't. Just because you have a website with a Give Now button on it doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to go to it and make a gift. You have to drive them to that. Major gifts are typically not going to come in unless it's based on a relationship that you have with that particular donor that leads to you making the case, making the ask, and closing the deal. And so it is really, really important, especially at this time of year, if you're trying to close out your fiscal year, making sure that you have all the dollars that you need in. If you've waited to now, until now, to try to meet your budgeted goal for fundraising, and sometimes this happens. Things get away from us. Next thing you know, it's Thanksgiving, and then boom, here we are in the last couple of weeks of the year. And sometimes we find ourselves having to raise 10, 15, $20,000, and we haven't really been active and out there building relationships and teeing up individuals to ask. Some of you may be asking people and talking to people for the first time this year right now. And if you're doing that, you're creating a transactional culture within your organization. You may have already have that in place. And so you may ask somebody to give, they may give what they gave last year, but if you had maintained a regular relationship with regular communication, regular contacts, seeing them, hearing from you, and so forth, off and on throughout the year, you'd be in a better position to ask for more than they gave last year. So, really, really, really super important that you're not waiting until now to hit your budgeted goal for the fiscal year, especially if your fiscal year ends on December 31st. Now, a couple of things. I often say this every year when I go live uh, as we approach this time of year, especially if those of you are watching who are relatively new nonprofits. If you are trying to get gifts in the door before the end of the fiscal year, and uh, and you're talking to donors, donors can actually put something in the mail to you as long as it's postmarked December 31st or earlier. So it doesn't matter if you don't receive it until January 3rd or 4th. If it's postmarked December 31st or earlier, then you can book it for 2022. And you're going to want to hold on to any of those envelopes of those checks that come in late. Because if you do an audit, which you should be doing once a year or once every other year, you're going to want to have that for your auditor so that in case there are any issues on the donor's end, you have the documentation that proves that that gift was mailed on December 31st or earlier, so that it made it in time to count for that fiscal year. So just wanted to make sure that you keep in mind why people give. It is the season of giving. We're all out, whatever you celebrate. Many of us are out there thinking about our loved ones, buying presents for them, And we're also thinking about organizations and the charities that do the good work that they do, and including that in our charitable giving. But we're not doing it because of the tax deduction. It is not the number one reason. And that's a true. Even if you look it up, you will find that that's not the number one reason. It really falls toward the bottom. It's because people have been asked. And if you're building relationships with high net worth individuals and you're making the case, making the ask, and closing the deal, chances are you're going to get more dollars for your organization, particularly if you're consistent with that communication throughout the year, so that you can come back and ask for more at the end of the year. So I want to thank you all for watching, whether you're watching live or in person, live or in person, live or recording. Um, it's been a pleasure. I will certainly be back next week to do one more of these for the year. But until then, I hope you all have a wonderful day. And as always, this whole fundraising thing at the end of the day, and it really sort of plays out in the list that I shared earlier, that fundraising is not about the dollars. It's about what the dollars do for the people that we serve. Thanks, and have a fantastic day.